Apple just did something incredibly Apple, not flashy, not dramatic, no one more thing moment. They didn't kill the dynamic island. They didn't replace it with an Android-style hole punch. They didn't magically erase the front camera and pretend physics doesn't exist. Instead, they quietly shrunk it. And somehow, that might be the biggest visual change the iPhone has had in years. Because at first glance, this sounds boring, like dangerously boring. Oh, wow, the hole is slightly smaller. Cool story, but give it a second. Because once you understand what Apple is actually doing here, it starts to feel less like a cosmetic tweak and more like a setup. One of those calm before the storm Apple moves where you don't realize what happened until your old phone suddenly looks ancient. The dynamic island has basically been frozen in time since 2022. Same shape, same position, same floating pill staring back at you every time you unlock your phone. Sure, the screen got bigger. Sure, brightness went up. Sure, we had the USB-C saga, but the island untouched, sacred. Like Apple declared it a protected landmark. And now, according to Ice Universe, who has an annoyingly good track record with Apple display leaks, the iPhone 18 Pro and Pro Max are getting a dynamic island that's about 35% smaller. That's not a rounding error. That's the kind of change you notice without measuring. The kind of change where someone looks at your phone and goes, wait, is that the new one? And Apple lives for that moment. Now, a couple of weeks ago, Tech Twitter absolutely melted down because rumors started flying that Apple was killing the dynamic island entirely. The idea was that Apple would switch to a single punch hole camera, Android style, pushed slightly to the left. John Prosser talked about it. Korean outlets picked it up. Even the information hinted at something big. It felt like one of those moments where everyone thought they'd cracked Apple's master plan, and then, record scratch, it all fell apart. Ross Young, who is basically the adult in the room when it comes to display leaks, stepped in and said, no, that's not what's happening. Turns out a lot of the chaos came from mistranslations, Chinese and Korean reports getting passed around, simplified, reinterpreted, and slowly mutated into something much more dramatic than reality. Apple isn't killing the dynamic island. They're doing something far more on brand. They're rearranging the internals. Right now, everything related to Face ID lives inside the dynamic island. The selfie camera, the infrared camera, the flood illuminator, basically the entire facial recognition party is happening in that little pill-shaped area. But according to multiple leaks, including from Instant Digital on Weibo, Apple plans to move the flood illuminator under the display and slightly to the left, potentially invisible, potentially under display, which means the visible cutout can shrink without compromising Face ID, without lowering security, and without Apple having to ship under display selfie cameras that still look like they were smeared with Vaseline. This is classic Apple behavior. Everyone else ships first-gen tech and promises software updates later. Apple waits, watches, lets everyone else take the PR hits. Then they move when the technology is stable enough that it doesn't feel like a science experiment. They're not chasing the cleanest look at any cost. They're chasing reliability, consistency, the kind of experience where Face ID works every time in every light without you thinking about it. And while everyone's arguing about cutouts, there's another league that deserves way more attention: the display brightness. According to MacRumors, Apple's brightness requirements for the iPhone 18 are so aggressive that BOE, one of the biggest display suppliers in China, might not even be able to meet them. That's wild when you consider that the current iPhone already hits around 1,000 nits in typical use, 1,600 nits in HDR, and up to 3,000 nits outdoors. That's already, why does my phone look brighter than reality territory? And Apple apparently looked at that and said, cool, do more. What makes this especially interesting is that right now the regular iPhone and the Pro models are basically equal in brightness. Same ceiling, same baseline, but Apple does not let the non-Pro outshine the Pro for long. That hierarchy always reasserts itself. So if brightness is going up across the board with the iPhone 18, you can almost guarantee the Pro models will get the best version of it. Apple is many things, but subtle about product tiers is not one of them. And here's the sneaky part. Apple probably won't even market this as a huge deal. There won't be a giant slide that says 35% smaller dynamic island. No dramatic applause break. This is one of those upgrades you feel more than you notice. The screen just looks cleaner, more open, less crowded, and suddenly last year's phone looks a little busy. That's Apple's real superpower. They don't need to shout. They let your brain do the comparison for them. So will the dynamic island ever fully disappear? Almost certainly. The dream of a completely uninterrupted slab of glass, no camera, no sensors, nothing visible, clearly hasn't died. But it's not happening with the iPhone 18 Pro. This is the transition phase, the cleanup, the internal reshuffle that makes the next step possible. Apple isn't rushing to be first. They're setting things up so when they finally do remove it, it actually feels finished. The iPhone 18 Pro isn't the revolution. It's the chess move before it. And honestly, that might be more exciting. Because when Apple starts quietly changing the fundamentals instead of chasing headlines, that's usually when something big is coming next. So now I'm curious, does a smaller dynamic island actually matter to you? Or are you still waiting for the day the iPhone becomes one perfect, uninterrupted sheet of glass? Because if Apple is doing this now, it's not accidental, and whatever comes after this is going to be very intentional, very calculated, and very Apple. See you next one. Peace out.